All right, let's talk about a piece of tech that's been a total game changer for developers. It's called Dapr. So what is this Sidecar superpower all about, and how can it make building apps way, way simpler? Let's dive in. So if you're building with microservices, take a look at this. Does this feel a little familiar? Maybe a bit too familiar? You know how it goes. You start with just a couple of services, but before you know it, you're staring at this complex web of connections that's a real pain to manage. And this is what I call the microservices maze. See, every one of those services needs to talk to databases, message queues, secret stores, the whole shebang. And that usually means you're pulling in all these different SDKs, one for AWS, one for Azure, another one for Redis. Your actual business logic gets all tangled up with infrastructure code. And what's worse, it pretty much locks you into specific vendors and makes your application fragile and a nightmare to change. But what if you could just untangle that whole mess? What if there was a better way to handle all that complexity without it ever touching your actual code? Well, this is where Dapr comes in, and it uses this really elegant idea called the Sidecar pattern to do exactly that. So Dapr, which stands for Distributed Application Runtime, is this awesome open source project that basically acts as a co-pilot for your app. Just imagine a small, separate process, that's the sidecar, that runs right next to your code. Your app just talks to the sidecar, and the sidecar handles all the messy conversations with the outside world. You know, the databases, the message brokers, all of it. Your application code gets to stay blissfully ignorant of all those nitty-gritty details. And this creates this beautiful separation. I mean, look at the difference here. On the left, you've got the old way where your core logic is just completely mixed up with infrastructure code. But with Dapr, over on the right, your application code is clean. It gets to focus on what it's actually supposed to do, the business logic, while the Dapr sidecar does all the heavy lifting. So how does Dapr actually pull this off? Well, it gives you a toolkit of what it calls building blocks. The best way to think about these is like a universal travel adapter, but for your code. It doesn't matter what cloud you're plugged into, you just have one standard way to get everything you need. Let's see what those look like. These are the core tools in the toolkit. For instance, say you need to save some state. Instead of writing a bunch of boilerplate code for Redis, you just make a super simple HTTP or gRPC call to your local Dapr Sidecar's state API. Want to publish a message? Same deal, just call the PubSub API. Your code doesn't need to know about Redis or Kafka or RabbitMQ. It just speaks one language, Dapr. And this whole standardized API thing, it leads to Dapr's most powerful feature. This is what I like to call its infrastructure magic trick. Seriously, this is where you'll really see the power of this approach. Dapr gets configured using these simple YAML files. Now don't worry, this is easy to understand. All we're doing here is telling Dapr's state management building block to use Redis as its database. See that line at the bottom? Type state.redis. Simple enough, right? Okay, now for a scenario that gives most developers a headache. Let's say your company decides to move off of a self-hosted Redis and onto a managed cloud database, like Azure Cosmos DB. Normally, this would be a huge project. You'd have to change your application code, pull in new libraries, test everything. It's a ton of work. But with Dapr, you just change that one line. That's it. You swap state.redis for state.azure.cosmosdb. You deploy this tiny little configuration change, and you're done. And this is the absolute key. The application code is completely untouched. It has no idea the database was just swapped out from underneath it. It was talking to the Dapr state API before, and it's still talking to that exact same API now. This is where Dapr saves you an unbelievable amount of time and makes your application truly portable. So when you put this all together, Dapr really does become this portable superpower for your team. Let's do a quick recap of the massive benefits you get with this approach. First off, you get that incredible portability. You can swap out clouds or services with just a config change, which means you avoid getting locked into one vendor. This leads to a huge boost in productivity, because your developers are focusing on what really matters, the business logic, not the plumbing. And because it's language agnostic, your Python, Go, and .NET services can all play together nicely. Plus, it bakes in resilience with things like automatic retries, just making your whole application stronger. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Dapr really changes the game, turning all that infrastructure complexity into basically just a simple config file. So the real question is, if you don't have to worry about all that plumbing anymore, what amazing things are you going to build next?